You're listening to the Fooled by the Root podcast.
Hello, everyone. This is your host, Heidi Marble. I am overjoyed to have Emma Stevens on our podcast today. She wrote the most beautiful book called The Gathering Place. And she actually mailed the book to me. And I have a quick story before we talk to Emma. So I have this beautiful little situation by my fireplace every night. I light my fire and I read whatever author's book I have. And I went to go read the book and it was gone. And I looked outside and my huskies had decided that that was a wonderful thing to make confetti out of. So I was absolutely horrified because Emma signed it and everything. I'm like, no. Anyway, I listened to it on Audible, finished it last night, and I was just so overcome by so many elements of Emma's story. So before we talk to Emma, I'd like to read her bio. Emma Stevens is a U.S. domestic adoptee from birth and has survived layers of trauma that have put her on multiple journeys. She developed the inner strength and courage to surmount the many struggles she faced. Her traumas were born from being an adoptee who struggled with being forced to wear an impossible mask of playing the part of the good adopted child. Because being relinquished and adopted has colored her life, it's Emma's desire to be part of the movement that is dedicated to helping bring forth change to the way our world views the needs and support of adopted individuals. She believes strongly in adoptees finding their voice and discovering their truth to have a solid sense of self and to reclaim their identities. Through telling her story, Emma is dedicated to help refine the narrative of adoption to include the entire complex truth. This memoir, Emma Stevens' first book, she is an undergraduate degree in journalism, has completed master's level coursework in psychology, specializing in marriage, family, and child counseling. She has 2 adult children and 2 cat children who she adores. Welcome, Emma.
Hi, Heidi. So great to be here.
Oh, so great to be here with you too. And I did try to piece your book back together for a minute.
Well, I'm glad you had Audible to listen to.
Yeah, me too. Definitely me too. Well, I'd like to talk about the image on the front of your book. There is a beautiful tree with a swing, and I have almost the identical swing and tree. And I would love to share that picture with our audience too, because I think that's another way that we are connected. But before we dive into the book, can you tell us, for those that I know you're out there a lot, but what can you tell us about your adoption story at the beginning? Can you lay down a foundation for us?
Well, I was in the 60s baby scoop, and I remember, as long as I can remember, I was told I was adopted. And my first memory is, one of them is that I cried because I thought, oh, that poor woman, where is she? And that must make her so sad, not knowing where I am, that my birth mother. And that didn't sit well with my adoptive mom. And from that point forward, it was very taboo for me to ever talk about my adoption story, because it was easier for my parents to think of my brother, who was also adopted from a different family, easier to think that we just were theirs and we had no beginning, and it just started the day that we were adopted by them. And that was how they were able to deal with adoption and sort of pretend that we were just their biological children. So for me, that really colored my life throughout. I did things, I grew up thinking I'm a strange kid, with these weird feelings. And I had this, what I now know is called saudade, which is a Portuguese word, and it doesn't translate to English, but it kind of means melancholy, or a sense of loss and longing, but you can't put your finger on it. And that's the way I felt all of my life until I started piecing together some things. And I still deal with that at times, but I really have, found a lot of my truths and found my voice and found out that I'm not a strange kid. And I was acting very normal. So yeah, it was very taboo for me to ever ask any questions. I was told that I was just the kind of kid that would look for my birth parents. And in my head, I was like, is that a bad thing? And then, as I grow up, I realized that's the normal thing. That's what we all as human beings need to know, where we're from, our story. And that's not a bad thing at all.
No, it's not. And I think one of the things that moves me so strongly about your story is how you've been able to take the pieces and parts of identity and begin to heal from the trauma. And you have such a journey toward that. I would love just to kind of jump in almost to the middle of your story where you begin to find your truth and your tenacity. Can you tell people how you got your adoption paperwork? This is the best story.
It's kind of a heist, isn't it?
Yes, without a doubt.
Well, so you want me to kind of touch on how that happened?
Yeah. Yeah,
All
I would
right.
love it because
Yeah.
it just really shows your personality and your strength.
I'm trying to think. It's so hard to tell because everything led to the next step, to the next step. But basically, what happened when I did come to the thought that I want to find my natural parents, I was fresh out of college and decided that I was going to search. And this was in the late 80s, and we didn't have social media, we didn't have computers, we didn't have any kind of search engines that we have now. So I'm making phone calls, writing letters. I'm basically throwing spitballs at the wall just to see what sticks. And after a few years, a few truths started to fall into place. And the biggest one is that I learned from the adoption agency that my birth mother had written a letter to them after my relinquishment. And she had used a fictitious name throughout her pregnancy at the maternity home, which a lot of them were encouraged to do. But this letter she sent after I was adopted and relinquished contained her real name. And that was the only place that it showed up. And so once I found out that that existed, then it became like, I need to break into that agency and get that letter because I knew no one was ever going to give it to me. And I had a friend at the time that we collaborated, and just to make a long story short, we were able to break in fairly easy. And we had our hats on and our gloves on, and we went in the cover of night. And it was, my heart was just beating through my chest, thinking that we're going to get caught. The police are going to tap me on the shoulder and say, "You're stealing your own birth records? You're going to jail." But once we did get in, there was a closed door. And I don't know why, but I thought, I'm going to open that door and see what's behind it. I had no idea where they stored 24-year-old adoption records. But I opened up the door to file cabinets and boxes on the floor that had tapes and files in them. And it was what we used to call microfiche. And you'd go, to the library, and they had a viewer where you could pay money and be able to look at these things kind of like on an old projector reel. I found the box that contained the older records. Then I found around the same area, the time period where I was adopted. And we just took that whole box, because we were so worried that someone was going to, just come in and haul us to jail. So we go to the nearest library and we get to their viewfinder. And luckily, my friend had all these coins because I was flat broke. I didn't have any coins. And we made copy after copy. We did eventually find my brother's first, said his name. And then we scrolled on 2.5 years later, found mine. And, I'm just like in such a surreal state of having found it. And we're trying to copy as much as we can. The library was closing. So I didn't have a chance really to look at anything at that point. It was just copy what you can, shove it back in the box. We got in the car. And after I, was just hyperventilating and seeing that there are no police anywhere, there's no sirens, I looked at my friend and I said, "You know what? We have to go break back in. I can't keep this box with all these adoptees with their names and their reels, and they'd never know their story." So we did. We went back and we made sure there was no police around, broke back into the door that we had first broken into. It was easier this time because it just, push it open. put it right back where it was. And to this day, I don't know if they ever knew that I broke in or if anyone broke in. There was a mark on the door, but I don't know. And I have learned that the statute of limitations has run out. So no one can listen to this and say, there she is, get her.
Oh, Emma, well, first of all, there's a couple of points there, but clearly we should not have to break in to find out our identity. So that's a whole nother podcast. But my goodness, the extremes adopted people have to go to be able to find out who they are. It's really, really heartbreaking. Mm-hmm. And I'm not encouraging anyone to do obviously, but I can tell you what, I would have been your partner. I would have done that with you.
Excellent partner, I can tell. And honestly, I just want everyone to know that that is not my nature to break into places. Well, I feel so justified. And I say that in the book too, is that these are my records. And I really didn't feel convicted about it at all. Now, I would have felt convicted if I hadn't returned the box for the other adoptees to somehow, someday, maybe they would get theirs. So in that box and on that reel that we copied, there was the letter, the original letter that she sent that had her real name on it. And when I found my birth certificate in the same information, she had used her fictitious name. So I wouldn't have gotten her name if I hadn't gotten that letter. But I couldn't read the name. It was just kind of all blurry and it was old. So I had to go to a graphologist, which is a handwriting analysis person, and paid more money I didn't have because they're kind of expensive. And it took her about a week, but she called me and said, I've got it for you. I have the name. And sure enough, it ended up being the exact name. And I went through some more levels of searching to find her, and levels of searching to find my birth father. When I found him, he said, he was so nice, such a nice man. But he said, I'm sorry, I'm not your birth father. And I said, well, why is your name on my birth certificate? And he said, I was just doing that to help out a friend. And I said, a friend? Really? You would do that? And then I said, what was the friend's name? And he said, oh, I don't remember that. So it just seemed kind of surreal to me that he wouldn't remember. He would, first of all, put his name on a birth certificate to help out a friend. Then he couldn't remember the name. So the end result is that he hugged me and said, good luck. Hope you find her, and all this and that. And that was the last time I ever saw him.
Wow, Emma, that's such a great story. And I know we skipped a lot of parts. Yeah. So let's rewind. We know that your adopted family wants to just pretend that you are theirs. Yeah. Can you give us a synopsis of what it was like growing up in that situation, and kind of take us to the point where you stepped out on your own and you thought you had freed yourself of all of the chains that bind?
Okay, well, I think my story is not a lot different than other adoptees, that we have an overdeveloped sense of responsibility, and we'd rather take internalize the hurt in us than see anyone else hurt. And so when my parents, they almost acted like my adoption was my fault, or it was my fault that they didn't have their biological children. And I took it on within me that I was holding things that weren't mine to hold. And that developed me as I grew up, thinking that, I've been over apologetic. I've been just thinking that, I don't know, that I should be the one to help out, and what's wrong with me that I don't want to help out. So that took me through multiple journeys. And one of them was alcoholism, because that's the easiest way to get rid of pain for a lot of people. And, we're overrepresented in the mental health field and in addictions. And so I developed my own addiction. But honestly, and I know this sounds very strange, very grateful now, because if I hadn't been brought to my knees from that whole experience and just unraveled and dismantled and had to look at my whole life, not just alcoholism, not just adoption, but my people pleasing, my over apologetic way perfectionism. I had to look at it all. And that's where I came out just, feeling so joyful that I was able to break through all that, find my voice, find my truth. And I don't want to hurt my family. I know that they would not understand anything that I'm doing, writing a book or anything like that. But boy, I really needed it for my salvation. I call God now my holy web because I look at him or spirit as just this connectedness. And that's where I find my joy now. That's my addiction, is connecting with people like you right now, that reciprocity that we have going back and forth. That is just so joyful to me. And yeah, I have crap days. We all do. But I just know how to, I've learned, and I am learning how to make peace with all that and realize that there's good and bad in everything, and everything's on a spectrum. And it's just, things have really gotten really good for me.
Well, that's so wonderful, Emma. And I appreciate you sharing all that. So many people can relate to those feelings, the over responsibility, the apologizing, the not wanting to take up too much space in the world, and the dismantling of your life. It led you to write this beautiful book, and the format of your book is so interesting. Can you explain to people in a nutshell what The Gathering Place is? Because when I first started reading, I was thinking of it as literal.
Well, I think, and I'm going to congratulate my two therapists that I have, because they've always invited me to let my mind wander and just trust that my brain is going to take me to where I need to be and the things I need to think of. And it almost allows you all those implicit memories that we pre-verbal don't remember. Our body does remember. And when I saw that visual of the tree and the swing, it looked so inviting to me. It looked like a magic portal of getting on that swing, feeling carefree, and that all my parts that make up me are welcome. And I just started brainstorming of, what if all my parts got together and had a conversation and had a reunion and said, you're welcome here, you're welcome here, we're all welcome here. And it all takes place under the big old oak tree with the swing, and just looking out at the vistas and the green grass. And it just kind of fills my heart with joy. One of the vehicles I used was what I learned in therapy, and it's called EMDR. Probably a lot of people have heard of that. And it's just a way to stimulate your brain, right brain, left brain. And it really targets those implicit memories that we don't recall, or we don't, I don't know, I always get that confused, remember, recall. But, it's in there, but we can't really speak to it. But when you do EMDR, that's the whole purpose, is to bring that stuff forward, that your brain will tell you what your body's feeling. And that helped me write the book. It gave it the framework of how I wrote that book.
Oh, Emma, it was so beautifully done. And when I was listening yesterday, I had a breakdown when I got to the part where you were talking about justice.
She's my favorite.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Can you tell us about tell us about her as she showed up to the gathering place? And remind me, was she 14?
She was like, I think I said 11 or 12.
11 or 12. Yeah. So that part of yourself shows up to the gathering place, and it just ripped my heart in two. Can you talk about justice, please?
Justice is very welcome, even present day in my life. And she's learning how to find balance, because justice is the part of me that had to finally realize that, hey, you're holding things that aren't yours to hold. And justice, her first idea is to drop it, just let it crash on the floor, yell about it, scream about it. It's how I got in touch with my anger, I believe. Because I'm typically kind of like, oh, I want to be a nice person, I want people to like me. But justice is just kind of in your face. And I love that about her, because she helps me know when I'm in a situation that is bogus. And she'll just say it. She's just very forthright. And I need her very much in my life. And I think that she shows up in my life at about 11 or 12. All of these ages are pretty fluid, to tell you the truth, all the parts in the book. But I, for some reason, said 11 or 12. And I think I spent younger Emma was just trying to figure things out. And then Justice gets to the age of where she's like, this is BS. And I'm not going to take it. And you're going to do this and you're going to do that. But that's where I say she's got to find balance in my life now, because sometimes I'll go too far. You know what I'm saying? But she's very welcome. But we're still fine tuning the integration. And it'll be my lifelong journey.
I love it. Thank you so much for talking about that. I also wanted to circle back because a lot of adopted people have difficulty in relationships. How did that play out before you did all the healing work? What can you expand on so that all of us can take some notes?
Well, I would think the word that comes to mind from my past relationships would be needy. And it would be also a push and pull of I'd see how close I can get you, and then so I can just push you away and maybe see that, oh, okay, there's the line of where you'll leave me. I'm always looking for that line that, you know, when someone says, I'll never leave you, and I'm looking for, oh, okay, what if I do this? And
Right.
Yeah. But when I said needy, it's that part of me that needs people to like me. And I would adapt. I'm so great at adapting. All of us adoptees are, you know, and I like to say I'm not adopted, I'm adapted. What do you want me to be? I'll be it. You know, just don't kick me out here. I'll just form into any shape you want me. And that was previous relationships. And to the extent of letting people do some pretty bad things to me, but I take responsibility because I did choose those people. And I chose at the level of where I was. And I take responsibility for that. Today, I would choose something so entirely different. And if I ever had the opportunity, like in a romance, it would look so different. But I'm okay on my own too. And I don't think I could have ever said that before. I was always had a boyfriend, you know, always needed that validation. And I'm looking for that validation internally now. And it's really the only substance that really matters. You have to learn these other things before you get to that.
Well, I love how you said it's kind of like you can only translate your life at the level of healing that you're at, or lack of healing. And that's what you attract in.
That's
so
what
the more we do the hard work, as painful as it is, the more open things become and the more peaceful, hopefully, ultimately, as we do the work. We're not caught in the constant turmoil. So, Emma, a lot of people, as you said, struggle with addiction. And what was it? Was there that rock bottom moment? And how did you scrape your way out of that? I think people love to hear the redemption story. It gives them hope.
I didn't go down easy. Let's just say that. I wish I could say I had this enlightened moment, but that's not the way it happened. I actually wrecked my car and didn't hurt anyone or myself, but I don't remember wrecking the car, how I did it, where I did it. I remember nothing. And I think that shocked me enough to the point that I asked to go to the hospital to detox, and went through that whole process. And then they at the hospital said there's this great outpatient program that you go to every day. And so I signed up for that. And when I got out of the hospital, and by that time, I'm not addicted physically anymore to the alcohol, which is great, but I hadn't changed my behaviors, my mind, my attitudes, all of that was the same. So that's why so many people relapse, because that hasn't changed. You have to flip that switch to be able to know how to handle that. So when I went through that program, it was really helpful. And then counseling after that, I went every week, and it was just a whole way of dismantling everything to get to know myself. And, you know, adoption was very much in there too. You could say I was kind of out of the fog when I searched for my birth parents, but you know, that was like 35 years ago. But now I tell you, I'm even more out of the fog because in the last 6 years that I've been sober, so many revelations have come to me and it only happened because I put alcohol away. And it was very difficult. And I thought, isn't it hard enough to quit alcohol? Do I really have to have another whole journey, in order to get well, to change my whole being? And the answer is yes. Because if you don't want to, I didn't want to live my life wishing I could drink. I wish I could have that margarita. I get to not have that margarita now. And that's how I truly feel. I feel joyous about that my body doesn't need that. And I make that choice for me that I can't live that way anymore. And I wouldn't have found my freedom if I'd kept in that role. But it takes your brain a little while to heal. You have to stay sober long enough for that prefrontal cortex to heal. And once that happens, then you can start making some better decisions.
So beautifully said. And what I love is, oh my goodness, how your message of hope, which we will get to. For me, your journey, Emma, is so about hope. So many of us feel that there isn't any. How do we get out of this dark hole, this huge, all of these layers of trauma? It is so overwhelming. And a lot of people in our community struggle deeply with just putting 2 feet on the floor in the morning, pulling the bed sheet down. So
Right.
I think sharing these stories and the journey, it's really a light on the path. So let's talk a little bit more about your family and reunion. What is all that like, and when did that happen in your life? So you found the what you thought to be your biological father, who gives you a hug and says no, but just pretending. Can you explain to us that, and then bring us to present day with where you're at with everything?
Okay, I guess I'll start with bio dad. And I can't tell you how much I remember thinking, he is being so nice to me. And he loves me, and he's interested in my story, but he says he's not my dad. But I walked away from that meeting innately feeling like, yeah, he is, because we had this one trait. I've plucked mine since then, but I have really German bushy eyebrows, and those were prominent right on his forehead. And I walked away thinking, I just feel like maybe he is. But 35 years go by, 34, 35, and my wonderful adult daughter, one night when she was 24 years old, so this was only about 3 years ago, called me and said, I just did my DNA, and a lot of people are showing up, and it's saying that they're my first cousin removed. And so I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I don't know why. I never thought to do a DNA test to find out more about my adoption story. I just got busy with children and being a single mom and all that. So when I really dug into it and got my own test, and I realized that the relatives showing up in her report were also related to me because it showed up plain and clear. And so then I realized as I dug deeper, I found my paternal family, my bio dad's family, found the surname that was his last name that I met, when I was all those years ago, and made a phone call to a cousin that was kind of, I was really a sleuth with the Facebook thing of looking at friend lists and looking at conversations. And, this person says, hey, cuz. I'm like, oh, write that down. I was quite the investigator. And I asked her, do you know James Adam Lehman, which is in the book? And she said, yes, that was my uncle. And so from that point forward, I realized that, yes, he didn't ever do a DNA test because he died 2 years previous, but I was able to confirm that, yes, he was definitely my birth father. I'll skip now to my birth mother. We had a relationship. I did find her, and we did have a relationship for maybe 2 or 3 years, but she hadn't figured out her own life. And that makes me sad because the joy that I've found that we talked about, she never tried to go on that journey. And so just kind of she wanted me to be her mom, and I couldn't do that. I couldn't. I did it for about 2 or 3 years, and then we just stopped talking and learned that she died about 2 years ago now. And so we had no cosmic connection. I hear a lot of adoptees say, "Oh, I see her and me, and we talk the same." I saw nothing, nothing. So that just is the way that kind of fizzled out. But my encouraging thing now is that I have found my birth father's family, and I've met quite a few of them, and I'm going to meet them again, more of them in this coming spring. And in the book, I say that we're about to have it, but it got postponed. And the funny thing about that is that if it hadn't been postponed, they wouldn't have already read my book. So now they know a lot about me, and I won't be coming in as the ghost cousin that I tell that I am in the book. They'll know my story. And so I'm really looking forward to that. They've been very welcoming, and a few of them have even said, "That darn James, I can't believe he treated you like that." I was like, "Thank you for saying that."
Thank you for sticking up for me.
Yeah.
I love how you describe how they have all this history together, and all of a sudden you float in like this ghost, and you have a totally different alternate universe. And for me, it was just so mysterious and exciting. But I also just wanted so desperately to plug into that and for that to also be my history. And there's no way to go back. There's no way to do that. And I think there's a lot of anguish that comes with us thinking the shoulda, woulda, coulda, what if we would have been raised this way? And
Yeah.
I believe, Emma, and I think a lot of people do, that we need time to grieve that
Mm-hmm.
and to be able to acclimate. And I think it's really wonderful that they've read your story because that fills in some of the void.
Definitely. Yeah, it's a very unique advantage and very serendipity that it happened this way. So I'm for whatever reason, I'm glad for the postponement, and I am equally happy that it's going to happen this spring. I was going to say, you mentioned about that liminal space that as adoptees we live in, because we're not quite of our adoptive family and we're not quite of our biological family. That I had to reconcile. I had to reach deep within me to, and in fact, I did this with the EMDR. We went into in utero things where, my brain thought, "Oh, this is bogus." My brain doesn't remember any of that, but lo and behold, it did. And it was this overwhelming sense of having a coach that was talking to me saying, "You're going to make it. And I know things seem difficult, but I think you're up for this challenge. And life wants life." I say that in the book. And you're not a bad baby. You're not an unwanted baby. You make it to this earth. That's a miracle. And so I've decided that, that I am in this liminal space. I'm me. And that's the poem I wrote. I am me, regardless of who my bio parents were or my adoptive parents. And I've stopped trying to, look for that external validation and just resting solid and peaceful within myself.
Emma, so beautifully said. And that leads me to a really important topic: self-abandonment.
Oh, huge.
Okay, that's worse than all of it in my mind because of the lack of worthiness we feel. And that self-abandonment, which I believe translates into self-destructive behavior.
Definitely.
And I think about that all the time as I'm eating a bag of Cheetos. I'm like, this might be self-abandonment just because I know this isn't good for me. And even though that's a silly example, it's just like all of that adds up, from the extreme, really big things to just not taking care of body, soul, mind. I don't know, because we don't feel like we're worth it. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think even your Cheeto remark is just key because it's your awareness. And the more we can be aware of, "Oh, I'm doing it. I see this very clearly." If we can't see it, if we can't name it, then, you can't do anything about it. But now I can say, okay, what does this feel like, Emma? Does this feel like you're abandoning yourself right now? Are you thinking you're not worthy? And so then I can go through my brain, do a body scan, and meditate, whatever, and realize that this is a broken story you're telling yourself. And I love Ian Cron. Have you ever heard of Ian Morgan Cron? He has a podcast called Typology. And
No.
it's so good. It's about
Ooh, thank you.
the Enneagram. I don't know if you've heard about that, but it's sort of a
Yes, I have.
Typing system, but it's about how to enhance your personality, not to label you. It's about how to show up the way you want to show up in your life. And if you're in a broken story, dadgummit, change it, rewrite a new one. That's the last line in my book is I'm going to write a new story. And the more I can remember that and get out of that space where I'm thinking of self-abandonment or sabotaging, I just loop back into that. That's being in health and not being addicted to my struggle.
We need to underline that, not being addicted to the struggle.
Because
Oh,
we get lost in it. We all can. We can get lost there. And that's our addiction to our own abandonment and struggle. But then I think, what have I learned to be true? And because I love myself enough now that I don't want to stay in that struggle. That's not me. It happened to me, but I want to get into that place of health and show up the way I want to show up. And I'm writing myself a new story.
Emma, I love that so much. I have two more things I want to do to wrap up the interview. But before we do that, is there anything we didn't touch on that you really want to speak out? Is there any element of your story? You've given us so much. It's just great. But if there's anything on your heart or mind.
I just looked at my notes. I have one.
Oh, good. Yeah, I have notes too.
I think it's adoptees and in the whole constellation of all that are adopted and all the people involved is that we need to, reform. We need to rethink how we think about adoption, but we also need to define love. What does love look like to you, you, and you, and you? And if it isn't wanting to set that person free, and if it isn't wanting that person to show up the way they need to, that's not love. And I've gotten very confused in that in my life because we love you. Yeah, but what is that to you? What does that love mean? And I think that's really critical to adoptees to hone in on so we don't get, I'm sorry to use the word, manipulated, thinking that it's
true.
love. And it's really just gaslighting or making someone else feel comfortable because they need you to show up the way they need you to show up.
Well, Emma, one of the things you wrote on your notes to me, you said you have a message of hope. And this is what you said: tenacity, perseverance, interior reflective work on oneself, forgiveness, love, always remembering. And we're reiterating this: life wants life.
Yeah.
So beautiful. And one thing I would like to end with, and I'm being spontaneous here, all of these beautiful, amazing people are listening all over the globe. We are connected in that web as you described. Can you take us, because you're such a prolific writer, can you visually take us to the gathering place, all of us, by the swing, by the tree, in the grass, with the sun? I just want people to be able to have that image of this grand gathering where we're all just there together, and you're giving us space to show up.
Well, I may have to shut my eyes to do this. Okay, we're going to start with just a really deep breath in, filling our lungs, breathing in positivity, and exhaling, letting all things go that need to go. And then we start looking out over the horizon and seeing all that is, all the birds and the trees and the colors and just the wonderful things that are all around us, the air just smelling sweet. And it makes us feel like we're just kind of wrapped up in a blanket with all that around us. And then we feel good in our body. Our bodies feel like they belong to us. And then even our blood flow feels like it's going in the right direction and into all the parts of our body that need the nourishment. And that's when we know things that are correct. People will ask you, how do you know when something's right? Well, it just feels right. And we just keep breathing. And we trust ourselves and we love ourselves. Love demands freedom. It always has and it always will. Rob Bell. There you go.
Oh. Yes, Emma, that was beautiful. And I would just encourage our audience to have that gathering place. And I'm sure you would do the same, to really invite all the parts and pieces of self. I think it's such a beautiful idea and concept, and worth all of the hard work. And you're living proof that healing and joy and peace is possible. Thank you so much, Emma, for your time.
Thank you, Heidi. Thank you for everything you're doing for the community, because we're all healing through all of this community. It's just the most wonderful thing, the connectedness.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. It's just been such a privilege to hear stories and to listen to other creators who are doing podcasts and books, and being willing to just share.
We're all teaching each other. We're all getting well together.
We are, and I really believe we belong to each other.
I do too. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think, and I'm going to congratulate my two therapists